started. Welcome to the show. Wow, we have 100 people here in the live studio audience. We had to turn people away because they wanted to come into the show tonight. Welcome to the show. This is Common Threads. We do this every Thursday. Well, no, not every Thursday. We took last Thursday off. Every Thursday from now on-ish. 2 guests, 1 hour, also-ish. Sound off in the comments. Let us know what you think. We'll be breaking down the top stories of the week. And let's meet our guests, because I know you're certainly not watching for me. Brian McCullough is an anarchist and comedian. He is making a return appearance here on Common Threads. Also a Bronx-based social worker. Brian, I appreciate you being back on the show and making her first appearance on the show. Sarah Rumpf is a contributing editor over at Mediaite. Sarah, I also want to give you the opportunity. You had a few other really cool parts of your bio you wanted to make sure we mentioned.
Oh, it was just kind of a joke, but caffeine addict, native Floridian. So I am certified expert in crazy politicians. And also I was a lawyer, but I escaped.
You were, like, do you say like recovering? A lot of reporters do that. Like
yeah, recovering lawyer. Yeah, I'm actually, my license is voluntarily inactive, and I'm actually in the process of reactivating it, which is a whole separate nightmare. But yeah, journalism is slightly less crazy than the practice of law most of the time.
That's wild, because I think journalism's like as nuts as it gets, because like we're constantly out of our minds. Brian, can I ask the things that you've been anarching about as of late since we've seen you last? Because it's been a few months since we've had you on the show, man. Anarching? I don't know the word for it.
Yeah, well, it's not that word. But no, I mean, it's been an interesting time. Like, I would love to be just like a fringe, crazy uncle somewhere, but you know, the work that I'm doing before the election is, to me, is like proven even more important now, and like community building and all of that. So, yeah, I would love to just go back to being on the fringe in terms of like solutions and perspective eventually, once my work is done.
Yeah, the most important work is done at the community level. Also, special shout out not only to Brian's mom, but Brian's cat, Winston, named after, of course, the most famous Winston from New Girl, if I'm not mistaken. Awesome. Killer to have both of you. All right, let's break it down. So we're going to start with the Jeff Bezos Washington Post stuff. Brian, look, you already got a comment shouting you out, Brian, because you're a favorite on the show. Jeff Bezos, the owner of the Washington Post, announced a major shift to the newspaper's opinion section this week. Says it will now advocate, quote, personal liberties and free markets. David Shipley, the Post opinion editor, quickly resigning after trying to persuade Mr. Bezos to reconsider the new direction. That didn't go so well. Sarah, I'm going to kick things off with you because it's your first time on the show. Talk to me about what you think is actually going down here with Jeff Bezos's new directive, at least to the op-ed side of things. Is this a big deal? Is it massive encroachment? Are we making too much of this?
Well, you know, there's a couple things going on. One, this is a company that he owns. He could tell them that he wants them to write positive things about cats every single day, and that's all he wants them to cover. Like that, it's his paper. It's his paper. From the perspective of the journalists, it was very interesting watching what happened from the news side, because not only were the reporters shocked by it, that they didn't know this was happening. I think Philip Bump's post on Blue Sky was something along the lines of, what the fuck? Like that was like, if my mom's watching, sorry. You know, they did not see it coming. And they also, a lot of them came out and publicly said, if there's any effort to put a thumb on the lever on the news side, I will quit. So, you know, there is a feeling that Bezos has been putting his thumb on the lever. There's been a lot of criticism. The paper had an editorial ready to go that was going to endorse Kamala Harris in the presidential race. That was, you know, tossed in the garbage. You know, and this is the whole thing. There's this ongoing debate. And, you know, for your viewers that don't know me, I come from originally a conservative activist background, young Republicans, college Republicans. I worked for a bunch of Republican candidates, former card carrying member of the Federalist Society, all of it. But the libertarian idea of pure unfettered free markets does not work when we have these billionaires that can control the entire government. And you don't necessarily have to have Elon Musk playing, you know, the court jester at a cabinet meeting. The way that they can have lobbyists to influence the laws, get out of tax loopholes, and all this kind of thing means that if I want to start a company that is in the same sphere as Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk or Bill Gates or any of these guys, I can't compete. I can't compete. So it's capitalism where the power is controlled by the people who've already made it. So that's where a lot of the criticism is coming from, that this is not a pure, good-hearted, freedom-based, liberty-based idea. This is the oligarchs scoring more points for themselves.
Sarah, I got to admit, I did not know you had the background with the Federalist Society, the Young Republicans. I mean, that's the resume of a Trump appointee to the Supreme Court. I'm just saying, for the third Trump term coming up in a few years, you could be on the short list for SCOTUS.
I doubt it, because I've been a very loud critic. It's just, every single day I get the, Democrat, socialist, whatever. And it's like, no, I promise you, my critiques are coming from a very libertarian place on free speech, a very conservative place on fiscal conservatism, a very conservative place on actual free markets. But I'm not the prevailing voice in the Republican Party anymore, which is why I am politically homeless.
Well, that's fair to say, although at once upon a time I would have said if you were a Trump critic, then yes, you wouldn't get hired. But then again, our Secretary of State and the president back in the day, they used to really go at it. And now we've got Secretary Rubio representing the country abroad. Brian, to me, I kind of looked at the whole Jeff Bezos thing, and it sort of struck me as Bezos kind of wanting to make the Washington Post a little bit more like the Wall Street Journal. But I kind of wonder how you see this is how far is too far. And then to Sarah's point, I think the approach, the concern is you kind of encroach more on the news side. But Brian, I'm also wondering how you kind of compare this, whether it's cozying up to Trump or just sort of trying to soften the blow against Trump, Bezos's actions, and then relative to any of the other billionaire tech bros that we saw. Man, they were all front row and center there for the inauguration.
Yeah, no, I think it's I echo a lot of what Sarah said. I think it is a very dangerous threshold to cross. It's been crossed, but yeah, I think it to me it shows in a lot of ways sort of the failures of the free market system that Jeff Bezos pretends to care about, and just capitalism in general. Unless I can see him making sure that the Pentagon picks up like 1 million subscriptions, just like all his other business ventures that are like subsidized by the government at this point. So yeah, I think it shows that with capitalism, they're sort of running out of value to steal, and so now they're trying to capture some of the most stable income, which is government and regulatory capture and tax evasion and all of that. And I think this is a pretty good litmus test for the journalists there. I do. I think it's going to be a challenge. I don't know what the answer is, whether it's to sort of stay there and stand on your principles, or leave, and as many journalists have been doing in the last couple of years, and sort of like embarking on their own and hopefully going towards a more like journalist and worker oriented and owned media landscape, which I would prefer. But no, what values is he talking about? The values of like assembly and all of that, which he's denying to his staff, preventing their unionization, or and also, I'm sorry, I just have to say it, I never understood what the fuck is the point of opinion in news? It's the opposite of news, right? So what are we doing here? Someone's opinion is just not news, or not a shared fact. So I don't even understand why op-ed pages exist in the first place. I don't know if anyone else can explain it. No one has yet. So.
Oh, that's a good question. Wait, I kind of like that. Yeah, Sarah, go for that. I'm curious your take. I have my own thing, but Sarah, okay. Yeah, I'm curious your take. I like this.
So I understand when people have criticisms and they say, well, this is opinion, it's not journalism, it's not fact. When I started writing originally, I was working on campaigns, and I got frustrated by the Orlando Sentinel for writing about political events that they were not attending or were leaving early, and that they were getting things, they were inaccurate. But my own views obviously colored what I wrote. And even something that is objective journalism, there is bias in the headline and the photo. The example that I like to give is, you remember the Trayvon Martin story? There were 2 photos that were used. One of him in color, smiling. One a few months later that's black and white, less clear, and he's wearing a hoodie, and he's frowning. It's the same person, but how the photo told you what the story slant was going to be, whether they were pro Trayvon Martin or anti Trayvon Martin. Journalists are human. It's impossible to have a journalist who is not coming from their own place of experience. I have always said that the answer is transparency. Don't pretend that you don't have a background. Don't pretend that you don't have a life before you sat down and wrote that article. Be honest about it. And we win by letting the First Amendment do what it does best and get all of these noisy, chaotic, conflicting, angry, rebellious, insane, loud, noisy ideas out in the sunshine. Let them fight it out and let them have it. I will say I like the approach that Mediaite has taken. I'm very proud of the fact that we have a lot of different writers with a lot of different views, and we are given an extraordinarily long leash to run around as long as we click the opinion tag. That is the instruction that we have been given over and over and over from everybody in management all the way up to Dan Abrams. And you know, when I write an op-ed, I can't turn my lawyer brain off, and I add a lot of analytical stuff, a lot of links, a lot of facts, a lot of details, a lot of analysis, because I don't want it to be just here's a blog post about why Sarah hates Trump. That's not why I ever want to sit down to write. Nobody cares. Like, that's not interesting. But here's based on my experience. Here's based on my legal background. Here's based on me actually reading the bill that everybody's arguing about. This is my analysis of it. And I am a human. I am an opinionated, biased person. You may agree or not agree, but this is the reason. And so I do think it has a place, but the answer for all of the concerns is transparency.
I like that, and I'm going to say that for transparency, I used to work where Sarah is an editor now. I'm the former senior editor of Mediaite, and yes, and I'm very proud of saying that I and Sarah and many of us from the Dan Abrams School of Media, which I feel like is a very difficult place to be, but I admire kind of the ability, and I think I learned a lot there, to call balls and strikes as fairly as possible, and to be in a newsroom environment where you could file an opinion piece and then someone else on the staff would be just as encouraged to file a different opinion piece directly challenging yours.
Violently different views.
And they appear side, and you got the two bylines side by side. So to someone who's looking at that and doesn't realize the opinion tag is up, maybe this gets into a different conversation of like general media literacy. I always thought that was cool because you're presenting, you're like, hey, there are facts for sure, but then there are kind of different interpretations of the facts a little bit. We got a few comments here. I'm going to kick a few of these to Brian because I think some of them have invoked Brian. Can we full screen these? Oh, here we go. Killer. Oh, I got the best producers in the game. Wow. Shout out to Dan and Taylor. All right, Bezos trying to sane wash billionaire positive nonsense, says John 4. Shout out to John 4. John 4 also says, billionaires taking over the government is the logical conclusion of free market forces, also not a side effect or mistake. That is the whole point. Brian, BMAC, if you have a true free market, were we destined here to have the billionaire oligarchs sort of call the shots the way that we kind of have today?
Yeah.
Okay, moving on. Great. That's the end of our show, everyone. Thanks for watching. No, actually, it's actually a perfect time for that point. We're going to put BMAC on Brian on hold because we want to hear from our sponsors because they pay the bills, and we're really grateful for that. We're going to take this conversation right after this. Folks, it's already 7:16. What am I going to do? I got to hit the ad break. If you're serious about investing, you got to know about public.com. You can invest in everything you can think of: stocks, options, bonds, crypto. Right now, this is true. If you're watching this live, you can get a locked-in 6.6% yield. It won't change if the central bank cuts rates with a diversified portfolio of investment-grade and high-yield bonds. Do all of your investing in one place with AI-powered fundamental data and custom analysis. Public is different from the rest of the competition because Public gives you all the tools you need to make informed investment decisions. It's all about being a more informed investor. They have a built-in AI tool that's called Alpha. It doesn't just tell you if an asset's moving, it tells you why the asset is moving, so you can actually understand what's driving the performance of your portfolio. Build your multi-asset portfolio with an account over at Public today. Head on over to public.com/CT to learn more, or, as we like to say, scan the QR code because we made it and it's cool and it's there and it's easy. And we're going to leave it up for a few more seconds. Get out your phone, take out the camera, set it up. You will not regret it. Did you just make the money sound?
Yeah.
Yeah, Dan, that was awesome. He just sheepishly, he's like, yeah, I did that. So BMAC, what's interesting to me about the well, there's a lot interesting on the Bezos thing, but the announcement came a day before. I don't know. Nothing's by coincidence. I don't want to be like too conspiratorial about this. But the Washington Post announcement came a day before the announcement of this new Blue Origin launch. That's, of course, also a Jeff Bezos company. A company, aside from like the cool, splashy celebrity launches we learned about today, that is a company with very lucrative government contracts. Is this a furtherance of a cozying up to Trump? Because nothing exists in a vacuum, whether it's Musk, Bezos, Pichai, or anyone else.
Yeah, well, like the one challenge I have with that is that I'm pretty sure Trump is illiterate. So like if you're buying a newspaper, I'm not sure that like that's the best way to reach him, you know. But yeah, I congratulations, you're a billionaire. You've recreated the technology that 1960s Soviet era scientists came up with. Am I supposed to be impressed with that? I don't know.
To the point of illiteracy, by the way, do you remember the Pete Davidson thing on SNL? Or he didn't. Pete Davidson did an interview about Donald Trump's appearance on. What's that music? Oh, I was like, what, am I the only one hearing that? Pete Davidson did an interview after Donald Trump hosted SNL, and he's like, I got all these stories I'm not allowed to tell, but one I can tell is that Donald Trump cannot read. That's at least what Pete Davidson said. It's like that was a known thing on the show. They like give him stories, they hold up the cue cards, and he's like saying completely different words than what's up there. Obviously, he does read off teleprompters, but regardless. What else we got
I think
here?
the one book I'm sure he's read is Mein Kampf is the only book I'm positive Trump has read.
All right. Yeah, all right. There we go. Listen, you need a few of those every show to spice things up here. All right. So because we got Sarah, and I'm really excited for her input on the journalist side of things. The White House Correspondents Association, in other news, that's my pivot to the next story here, seized control of pool reports to the Trump administration. Sarah, I'm sure you've been dialed into this one a bit. Reversing decades of precedent, the White House Correspondents Association announced this week it would no longer coordinate shared coverage of the presidency in an escalating dispute over press access to official events. The association represents dozens of news organizations that cover the president every day, and said it would no longer manage the rotating cast of reporters who attend White House events or compile those shared accounts of news that are widely used by nearly all newsrooms in American journalism. Sarah, your thoughts here? Good move to shake things up? Is this an administration acting too aggressively? They're definitely flying in the face of how things have been done for a very long time, including during the first Trump presidency.
So, look, as somebody who literally got my start in this business by Googling how do I make a blog, there's a very old Blogspot website that's still up that is adorably amateur, and I'm leaving it up because I'm proud of it. I get the people who are saying we need more voices. And again, like I'm so libertarian on free speech stuff. All the voices, all the people, all the views, get it out there. But the problem is that what the president is doing and what the White House is doing affects every single American. So there is a public interest here that needs to be understood and respected. And for years, the way that the White House press corps has operated, you will often see in a news report something that says, according to a pool reporter. And that's because even within the White House press briefing room, is not room for every single reporter who's part of the White House press corps. And on Air Force One, even more limited space. So what happens is these media organizations that have all kinds of different viewpoints are sharing the conversation with each other on who is available, who's traveling with the president, who's in DC, who's available to go to a 1 p.m. press conference, who's available if news is breaking in the middle of the night and they're called to the White House because something insane happened, who's available at any given time. And they split that. And a lot of the interesting details, and sometimes the details the White House doesn't want to come out, come from these pool reports. And if you look back during the Biden administration, a number of times when Biden said something and then offered a conflicting answer later, or had some sort of verbal stumble or some sort of gaffe, or, some sort of any kind of action or comment that the White House PR people would prefer was not known. It came from the pool report, because the pool reporter, whoever is in that role for that moment, they are there very close to the president and are reporting on it. And their job is to transcribe what is going on as accurately as they can. So with the White House now saying, no more White House press corps, screw you to the White House Correspondents Association, we are in control of this, and we just want our friendly pets here, that's taking away a level of transparency that every White House in modern history has had, even though they've grumbled and hated it. There's a level of access now that is being cut off, and if you are not approved MAGA friendly, you're not going to be in the room. And that means that the American people now have less access and less knowledge of the president. And, again, I will give him kudos. He does have these press conferences. He answers these questions. He gives these freewheeling answers. That is good. It was bad Biden did very few press conferences. I'm never going to defend that. But you have a situation where the only people they're allowing in the room are the ones that are on board with the Trump agenda. And that is just counter everything that the free speech tradition in this country is supposed to be about.
Brian, I'm curious first of all, we just had a good comment there. Let's put up that comment. I don't want to ignore it here. Arena Moore, how would you pronounce that? I don't know, whatever it is, but shout out to the name. Trump loves to call the media fake news, which made it so much tougher for journalists to do their job and for us to trust what we read. Brian, I'm curious at the community level, the local level, right? Because I feel like, it's so funny. There's this big move away from, you got a lot of national news desks, I think especially after this last election. They realize, ironically, local news model has it better because people watch local news. And there's a lot of different reasons for it, including the fact that it's just like it's on channel 2 and 4 and 5 and you're watching a sports game. And then after the game, you sit around, you watch local news. I feel like on the community level for you, Brian, the relationship between how people at the community level in the Bronx or anywhere else you're working, their relationship to the news is probably first local news here in New York, and then maybe secondarily at the White House level. But I wonder whether it's the Adams administration here in New York City or the Trump White House at the national level. Where have you seen the biggest failures of media in terms of either access or support or criticism for the elected officials? And where does press need to do better from where you're situated in the community work that you do?
Well, I think it's definitely a systemic level in the way that a lot of local newspapers have been absolutely hollowed out, and I think that good media, good press, again, good journalism trickles up, and a lot of the national publications would get stuff from local news, and I think when you lose that, you lose a lot of context, and it's just vibes at the national level. I think New York journalists have done a really, really good job in trying to hold our current mayor accountable. But, this is just to put it in historical context. It's just, fascist authoritarian moves 101 in terms of trying to control the media, control the narrative. And I think this is like a fever dream for Republicans because, they always, whatever their professed values are, they don't want more fair and balanced news. They want news that's less critical of them. They don't want more equitable taxes. They want less taxes for themselves. They don't, the minimum wage it's just too high. They don't have a number in mind. They prefer it to be zero. And so, this is it. It's not sort of a serious, informed conversation. And it's just going to wind up being Trump sort of sharing stories with all of his grandkids who work in, the press on their blogs at some point. And we're worse off for it, for sure.
We had a killer comment up there a moment ago, but I like this one too. The big media failure of the Trump era is all of the major papers spending all of their time covering Trump's statements and not enough covering actions. There's this, okay, I'll read this one too. The drain of the press pool is a calculated move to intimidate and marginalize the media because the media is the cornerstone of democratic governance. That is what I'm talking about.
Amen.
All journalists love pro-journalist content. We're so navel-gazy, all of us. We like, no one will wax poetic better about how important the press is than members of the press. As a former card-carrying member of the White House Correspondents Association, quite literally, we have ID cards. I still have them at home. Sarah, I wonder to what do you know, is the media, I hate using the phrase like the media because it's such like a lazy catch-all, but do we consider the press completely blameless? And I look back at the first Trump administration, which I covered. I was in that association, sometimes in the pool, sometimes in the Oval Office, at those the gaggles, like the sprays, you're shouting out questions. You know, and I've spent a lot of time kind of thinking like, you know, was coverage fair? Was coverage not fair? I compare it to previous administrations and stuff like this. But, you know, I wonder, Sarah, kind of what are the learned lessons for reporters from the first Trump administration? And to what degree should the press, again, to use a lazy catch-all, be licking its wounds and saying, yeah, you know what? We did kind of fuck up the first time. And maybe this last election was just a forceful critique in part of the way that we handled Republican policies in the past, because Trump went 7 for 7 in the swing states. So clearly voters are not necessarily aligned with what a lot of members of the national media, at least in DC, seem to think is the right way to do the job.
Okay, there's a lot to unpack there.
There was.
Well, first of all, the comment about focusing on Trump's actions versus his words, God, man, that is in my heart. Trust me. And I feel the ongoing conflict that every media organization has right now, because Trump, you know, for all the discussion of he doesn't read books and whether he's actually illiterate and, you know, he's a moron who does this, he is extraordinarily intelligent as an entertainer and as a speaker to compel the audience that already likes him. He's repellent to the people who don't like him, but for his fan base, he is extraordinarily gifted at connecting with them. And, you know, for a media that now has to be conscious of how traffic is coming and where the profit comes from and how the advertising dollars and viewers and subscriptions and all these complicated things so that they can afford to pay me a salary, it's hard, because when Trump says that he's going to let Wayne Gretzky decide whether we should annex Canada, that's weird and crazy and kind of hilarious and makes a fun headline and is a fun photo to put up. But in the meantime, the things that he is doing at the Department of Justice and the statement tweeted by Ed Martin, who's the acting U.S. attorney for Washington, D.C., that he is President Trump's lawyer and directly attacking the Associated Press, that's fundamentally horrible and a much bigger problem. Like, Wayne Gretzky is not actually going to be, you know, leading a force to invade his own native country. That's not happening. That was nonsense. But the things that are actually happening are very troubling. But look how much longer it took me to talk about one tweet by Ed Martin versus Gretzky Canada, haha. Like, the funny stuff is easier to write. The funny stuff is shorter to write. Getting into constitutional complicated things is hard. And we are becoming an increasingly short attention span kind of society. Idiocracy was a documentary, you know, and, you know, we've got, it's really, really hard. And but we have to keep doing it, because if we don't keep trying to explain these things, then we're giving up before the fight is lost. And if you look back, every single authoritarian leader that has come to power has done it with the same playbook. History is an open book test, and we are failing repeatedly. The playbook is always the same. Identify a real problem, exaggerate it, blame it on a foreign group or a group within your country that you can other and make foreign, and demonize the media and restrict their ability to tell the truth and report. That has been the playbook every time. And this is not a surprise. This is not a shock. Trump has been doing this from the beginning. Even in his pre-political days, he was known to call the tabloids using a fake alias and tell stories about himself that were exaggerated and untrue from the beginning. I mean, there's an article Leslie Stahl is talking about when she interviewed him during the 2016 campaign, and he tells her flat out that he demonizes reporters because he wants to discredit them and demean them and make them look like trash, so that when people write negative stories about him, they won't believe them. Like the plan all along has been to demonize reporters, enemy of the state. That's language that Trump and his allies have used. Enemy of the state. I am not the enemy of the state. I am a person in this state. I am an American citizen. I want to have a happy, successful, prosperous, free country. Like that. That is what I want. So I'm not an enemy. And even if I criticize the president, I criticize a member of Congress, I criticize a governor, I am not the enemy of my state or my country. That is a crazy thing to say. But that kind of rhetoric has led directly to elected officials who dare to vote against Trump getting threats, to journalists getting threats, sometimes even physical confrontations. Like it's not just mean tweets. They have a real impact. And, it's important that journalists are trying to continue to report the facts on things, and people are understanding what that role is supposed to be about.
So let me get Brian back in here. But, to Sarah's point, I mean, I think, part of the concern, and I think to Trump's kind of credit, yes, and I really don't disagree with very much of anything Sarah just said. I just cannot help but admit, if I'm being really honest, that there is fundamentally just a different approach that, again, I'm going to use the lazy catch-all of like the press, the DC press corps, whatever you want, fill in the blank here. Like, you just approach Democrats differently than you do Republicans. You're inclined to challenge Republicans on things that you're not going to call out Democrats on bullshit. How many reporters sat there on their hands and on their ass the last 4 years and was afraid to say the quiet part out loud, which was Joe Biden publicly has a hard time forming complete sentences. Oh, we're not going to say it. Oh, but now he's out of office, so now we're going to write New York Times best-selling books about, the mental decline of Joe Biden. We didn't have this conversation the last 4 years, to Donald Trump's point. And additionally, I don't think it's entirely fabricated for Donald Trump, because he capitalized on the reality that people felt in their communities. Like, hey, are you paying too much money for eggs? Is inflation far too high? Look around at your local communities and see that there is a surge of migrants that are here. You recognize that some things are changing. I don't disagree with everything Sarah said, but to give credit to Donald Trump, I feel like as if he's also capitalizing on a very real reality in the minds of a lot of voters, and he is dealing with a base of journalists for a lot of reasons that we could get into later if we want to, that just, I feel like in our core, and we don't admit this out loud, we approach, if you have a D next to your name, you're gonna get the benefit of the doubt a lot more than you do if you have an R next to your name.
Well, I just want to first and foremost affirm my commitment to like not speaking as enlightenedly or and as intelligently about the press as you two. So thank you so much for getting me in here. But I think like are babies, really intelligent for, crying to make their moms feed them? Like, I don't know. And I think like, working in mental health, I can be happy to share a lot of the things I am seeing with Trump right now. But I do think it is an abject failure of journalism. Absolutely. I mean, and I think, every journalist bears some accountability, but I also think, again, it's like a systemic issue where like, if it bleeds, it leads. And, people could write sort of like in-depth, in the weeds articles about policy proposals and all of that, or they can just talk about what a big giant idiot Trump is and the things he's tweeting and saying. And, they just have to follow the clicks, and, the tail eventually wags the dog, and they stray from, their mandate.
I mean, all this comes after, this is just an open toss-up, and this isn't like too inside baseball, I don't think, for like, reporters. This comes down to, and I'm going to be there tomorrow for the first time to see the newly renamed Gulf of America. I'm very excited. A federal judge this week declined to temporarily restore the Associated Press's full access to the White House, scheduled a hearing for March 20th. We'll have more in a few weeks to hear more arguments. It does seem to me, and I'll stick with Brian, then I'll go back over to Sarah. I mean, Brian, this idea of kind of like punishing the press because you're the president, you're coming through and you're like, hey, I know we've called it the Gulf of Mexico for like hundreds of years, but I'm going to go ahead and change the name overnight. And now I'm going to punish reporters who aren't aligned with doing what I want to do. You don't have to be a journalist to kind of, I feel like, scratch your head. But you, Brian, as a news consumer, you know, how do you look at a story like that and say, I mean, I don't know, like in your casual conversations, Brian, are you calling it the Gulf of America because the president told you to do so, or not necessarily? Correct. All right. Good. No, okay, I'm kidding.
Yeah, I mean,
Brian,
like to me, this reads as a test, and you know, who will obey in advance and who needs to be chastened, and God, the Gulf of America thing. It's just like part of my brain dies every time I hear it. Like, so. No, I think he, you know, like he makes everyone who like affirm their loyalty to them by making them publicly debase themselves in public, and this is just sort of like an industry-wide issuance of that.
Sarah, your thoughts either on the Gulf of America thing or more directly, Sarah, what does this mean, this whole flat, and I bring up the AP thing with the Gulf of America because I think that's kind of what started this whole thing with like the press pool and the press access, because the AP, of course, Sarah, as you know, is one of those legacy outlets that's pretty much always in the pool. But what does this mean, if anything? And this might sound like a silly question, but the White House Correspondents' Dinner, right? I mean, it is, and I can admit, it is a very silly event and a very silly weekend of parties, and we all absolutely love it. And it can be true that the White House Correspondents' Weekend is to fundraise, and there are scholarships, and there's incredible work that goes on. That's true at the same time as like it's a very silly weekend of parties. But obviously the tone and temperature of the relationship, Sarah, of the press to the presidency now seems to be more fractured than it's ever been. And I'm curious, Sarah, how you see that dynamic playing out.
Well, you know, what Brian said about this being an effort, a litmus test, and an effort to get them in line. You know, if you don't use the words I want, we're going to cut off your access. You know, this is, and again, like, this is the tyrant's playbook. This is the fascist playbook. This is something that has been done over and over and over again, that you impose a insanely severe penalty on somebody for stepping out of line to encourage the others to stay in line. And people need to understand what's going on with the AP here. It's not them being fussy over one word. They are an international press organization. The United States ability to control names ends, you know, I forget what the exact border is, but there's a certain space outside where the land starts and the water stops, where it becomes international waters, and that's not ours anymore. We can rename Mount Denali into Mount McKinley. We could name it Mount Donald Trump if you wanted to. That's in our borders. So the Associated Press saying we're international, we're not going to do this, and him punishing them, he's right that they don't have a right to the privilege of riding on Air Force One or being in the Oval Office or certain things like that. But his problem is that that's not where the First Amendment analysis ends. There is a lot of case law on this, that even if something is a privilege, if the government is revoking it as retribution to punish you for your speech, then that's a violation. There was a case when Rudy Giuliani was mayor of New York City. The Brooklyn Museum of Art had one of those controversial art depictions of the Virgin Mary. I forget the details. She was covered in excrement, or the one where they had a statue of her in like a vat of pee. It was one of those things that made a lot of people understandably angry. Rudy Giuliani, as a Catholic, was like, this is horrific. I am zero funding the museum's budget because of this. Like, it was very blatant. Floyd Abrams, the First Amendment pioneer attorney and also Dan's dad, represented the museum in that case, and they got their funding back because the city could reduce their budget, cut their budget off, never give them another dime, but they can't do that to control their speech. And again, this is the AP saying, we want to use this word instead of that word. And the Orwellian White House is saying, no, war is peace. This is a free speech retaliation. So if you look at the judge's order and the comments he said when he was issuing the order, they declined to give a temporary restraining order, which is an emergency motion, because he said the AP had not met the threshold to require to justify that relief right now. But he literally said that the White House should reconsider what they were doing, and was very openly skeptical of the idea that they would be able to come up with any argument to justify this. Like, the expectation by a lot of free speech legal experts is this is not going to fly, but they just didn't meet there's a very high requirement to get something in an early stage of litigation as a temporary restraining order on an emergency basis. It's really hard. So making them wait a couple weeks is not a massive damage and massive loss of their rights. Getting a full briefing and full oral argument from both sides is a prudent move for the court to help, have a ruling that will be sustained on appeal. So this was not a victory for the Trump White House. This is going on, and the AP is going to absolutely live to fight another day. They did not lose a single thing with that order.
Right. Yeah, and again, we're going to Brian, go for it.
So, like, if you think you're doing the popular stuff, you don't try and restrict the media, right? And honestly, it's kind of a beta move, to be honest. But also, face the music, bro. Come on. I forgot my other point, so we're doing good.
It's all right. No, we're not doing good. We're doing great. All right, and everyone's having a great time with it. That's it. Okay, so before we got, listen. We've been doing the show for a while. I don't frequently get called out, but we're fucking with this comment big time in the show. You got to hear the producers laughing as this shit gets pulled up. So shout out to John Ford, who says, "Is JD trying to curry favor with the Trump White House by constantly saying Gulf of America?" Yeah, if you know me, then you know I have a long history of cozying up to Donald Trump for sure. We're just asking questions. Listen, that's the Trump Elon Musk thing. Listen, I'm just asking questions.
And also the core stuff, if press can find where Taylor Swift is on vacation or shopping, why can't the press just take that approach? They can't be like the Democrats, where it's oh, I guess we can't do that anymore. We'll just go home and sit this out. You're the press. You can find Trump. He plays a lot of golf. Okay, he's out there in the open.
Fair, and I gotta be honest. The reason
he has the Secret Service. I can't just go run up to
I want to address this comment. I mean, honestly, the only reason I don't always call it the Gulf of America, but I found myself calling it the Gulf of America more, and maybe this speaks more to my relationship with big tech and devices. I never called it Gulf of America until Google Maps changed it to Gulf of America. And I'm a big Google Maps user. If a lot of other people, it's everywhere I've been is pinned with hearts and flags and this and that. And I live on Google Maps. I get around the city. I was just in DCL week. Every time I go to a new place. And now once that change was made in my head, it was that. It was sort of ironically, it was the Sundar. It's more trying to curry favor with Sundar Pichai at Google, I think, than anything, than the presidency. I actually don't really give a fuck what the president says. But as soon as Google makes the change, I'm like, but that's a deeper, more dystopian sci-fi, I think, approach to it. But I actually think that's right. Okay, so you two hold on. B-Mac and Sarah, I'll be right back with you because, again, we're going to pay the bills, and it's that time again for the show. God, I love that person's what is JD doing? All right, folks, if you're serious about investing, you got to know about public.com. You can invest in everything, options, stocks, crypto, bonds. Right now, as you're watching, the 6.6% yield stays locked in, even as Jerome Powell and his colleagues at the Federal Open Markets Committee may cut interest rates later on in the year. You don't even really have to worry about that because your yield stays locked in. You do all your investing in one place with AI-powered fundamental data and custom analysis. Their built-in AI tool, Alpha, gives you everything you need to know to be a more informed investor. Not just that a stock is moving, but why the stock is moving. Today would be a great day to have that information, a day after NVIDIA's big earnings report after the bell yesterday. Build your multi-asset portfolio with an account over at Public Debt today. Scan the QR code or head on over to public.com/CT to learn more. BMAC, Sarah, time now for an age-old fan favorite segment of the show that admittedly we have not done in quite some time. Japan Dan, hit it. You could tell we haven't done it because I haven't had a clean shaved face since last summer. Okay, so this is pole dancing. OGs of the show would be like, damn, they stopped doing that segment, but we brought it back now. This is about Elon Musk's approval rating here and the work that he's doing at Doge. And Brian, I'm going to kick things off with you here, trying to find my numbers. This is a Washington Post poll, ironically, from February 13th to the 18th. Net 38% of respondents say they approve of how Musk is doing the job, but it clearly splits up between parties. 70% of Republicans give this the thumbs up. I actually think it would be much higher for Republicans. You mean like 3 out of 10 Republicans are like not in favor of what's going on? And only 6% of Democrats. Brian, I'm curious your take about the political ideological divide we see here of support for Musk, or your own personal thoughts, Brian, on what so far you've seen out of efforts to cut the bloat of the federal government.
Well, it's easy for me as someone who has like a number in mind for like too many plane crashes and like too much Ebola, you know?
Sure.
So.
You hardliner.
Is there any more, or is that it? You're like, there's a level for it.
I'm a 2-issue voter.
2-issue voter. Those two things right now. So obviously there are concerns. Sarah, I'm sure the divide between Democrats and Republicans doesn't surprise you, but Sarah, I do wonder what like the leash of this is. Like, how far are we going to get to like even Republicans are sitting there being like, this is not really what we voted for here. This is like, we're getting carried away.
Yeah. So I would like to join Brian in saying that I am also anti-plane crash and anti-Ebola. So yeah, I think we can get really high polling on those two issues. And that's the problem. And this is where, you know, there's a hubris going on here. Icarus flew really high and had a beautiful view and was looking down on the earth below him and having the best time until the sun melted the wax and he came crashing to the earth. Can you tell I'm the daughter of a former Latin teacher.
Cool.
This will go fine until it starts impacting significant numbers of Trump voters personally. And the things that they are doing and the reckless aggression that they're approaching for these agency cuts and program cancellations and budget cuts is going to affect people. I am the first one to agree there is absolutely fraud and waste at the federal government. There's a lot of stuff that the federal government does that the states could handle. But the problem is that you don't just stop something in the middle suddenly with no plan of what comes after. And for all the talk of we're voting for Trump because he's going to run the country like a business. Well, that guy went bankrupt a lot. He was the only guy in Atlantic City running a casino during that period that lost money. Everybody else was like swimming around in it like Scrooge McDuck. So number one, he's not a great businessman. But number two, if you were a business and you wanted an audit to come in and help you advise on where to cut and how to change things, you would not let them just close one of your locations on the first day. You wouldn't let them fire your entire janitorial staff without some plan of who's going to pick up the trash. You know, with a law firm, you know, the work does not get done solely by lawyers. There is a team of paralegals and secretaries that are absolutely essential for the work getting done. You cannot go into any existing business enterprise and shut down a whole department, fire a large percentage of staff without taking any analysis and consideration into what's going on. And what we're seeing here, you shut down the entire Department of Education. It's not just those people that get free lunch that are going to get affected, which is actually something I heard somebody say once, and it was absolutely just detestable attitude. But there are a lot of kids that have, different learning issues and have, individualized education plans. Those things are all researched and put together and administered and distributed and regulated by the Department of Education. Those things could be passed off to the states, but if you just cancel the program and fire everyone who is working on it, then there's no one to do it. These programs that we're funding for aid overseas with AIDS medicine, if you stop giving the medicine, or tuberculosis, you stop giving the medicine midway, you end up with antibiotic resistant tuberculosis. You end up with AIDS complications that are deadly for women that are pregnant and HIV positive. If you give the drugs throughout the pregnancy, the child is almost always born without HIV. And stopping these programs in the middle is not just going to lead to deaths, but we are a connected globe. Some tourist is going to go visit a country, or someone's going to travel here for work, and the Ebola that is just in some African village that somebody might be sneering at, and I don't care what happens to those people, the Ebola that's in that village may end up in Kansas next year. So, these programs have
something to be conscious of. I don't mean to cut you off.
successful.
I do want to get over to BMAC. Brian, what has waste, fraud, and abuse looked like in your experience at the local level in New York City, and how has your work been impacted by it?
Waste, fraud, and abuse at the local level. I really don't think there is much, at least not that I've seen. There's always going to be like, some kind of, corruption stuff, but this is like a way bigger issue at the federal level. And like, I know we discussed it last time, and we said like, hey, if he goes after like all the stupid military contracts and all, the Defense Department ones too, that could be good. I haven't checked Twitter since the show started, so I don't know if he's done that yet. But I will disagree with Sarah on 2 points. Like, I think that Republicans will be okay with this as long as someone else is getting it worse, and I think that's a big part of this. And also,
God, that's bleak.
Yeah, oh yeah, just strap in. So like, I've been like watching these like very acrimonious town halls with like staunch Republicans, and it'll go fine until they can like blame it on some out group like trans people or immigrants or something. But again, like, the Democrats could be like piggybacking and planning like events the next day to sort of offer a countervailing vision of the world, and they're just not. And so like, they're only getting information from the Republican side, for better or for worse, and they're just completely seeding the entire narrative. And so like, there's this like Faustian bargain that capitalists have made, where like, the free market will always be better regardless of what the government can offer. That's not true literally anywhere else in the world. And so it's sort of this race to the bottom between like the shitty returns that the free market offers and like what the government can and is deciding to offer. And so now, it's a Republican fever dream to just like take the government side off the table completely. And then I don't know, maybe Musk or Bezos or Zuckerberg or Rogan can now be in charge of like the security services and the issuance of all these contracts.
Right. I think, by the way, 10 points for use of the phrase Faustian bargain. Now it's a party. We got at least one of those references on the show. Okay, now it's time because we got a couple minutes left. This is legitimately a fan favorite segment. Brian, you know what we're doing. Sarah, it's your first time. Japan Dan, hit it.
Say something.
Nice. Say something nice. Sarah, for you, it's your first time here. I'm going to have you start. I'm going to conclude the show here with Brian. This is a part of the show where we like to say something nice about any or anything with whom we disagree. Right? We're just trying to find some common ground here on the show. It's what we're all about. So, Sarah, I'm curious if you could say something nice about Elon Musk and maybe a bit about the work that he is doing. This isn't like a tongue-in-cheek sort of thing. Legitimately, what could you look at and say, you know what, I may not agree with everything, but at least on this, I think he's doing a good job. This is good.
I was thinking of something nice to say about Ron DeSantis, which is also hard for me.
If you got one, I'll take DeSantis.
I don't have anything for Elon because honestly, like, I think he is one of the most pernicious influences in both technology, business, and government. But DeSantis, who I've been a very, 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 very loud critic of, he did the right thing today, and his appointed attorney general did the right thing. The Tate brothers came back from Romania and landed in Florida, and DeSantis was like, I didn't invite them here. I didn't know they were coming. I don't want them here. And the attorney general, I mean, he makes a lot of noise about, you know, trying to investigate things that are not really his purview. But the clear message from the government in Tallahassee was, we do not support these guys. We are not on board with this. This is bad. Thank you. Thank you. Like, regardless of the criminal issues in Romania and Britain, what they have admitted doing is abusing women. What they have admitted doing is sexual assault. What they have admitted doing is predatory. Nobody would want their daughters to be involved in this stuff. It is vile. Thank you, Governor DeSantis. You did the right thing today.
B-Mac, over to you, and I'm going to ask you, this might be a stretch, man, just go with it. B-Mac, say something nice about capitalism.
Coke Zero. I'm a big fan of Coke Zero. Socially, only socially. Right.
Capitalism gave us Coke Zero. That's what you're thankful for? That's the best we can come up with. I know you're not a big fan of the system, but financial markets, anything?
My portfolio has taken a beating, JD. Really.
Sorry about that. Really?
I'm hedging in a high yield savings account as well, so it's not. You know, I'm weathering it, but there's a couple ETFs I have my eye on for sure.
All right, fair enough. That is as good as the segment's going to get, and I'm really grateful for both of you here. And thank you for playing game with Say Something Nice. I know it's not easy, and it's never to make anyone uncomfortable. It's just trying to look at people or look at a system that you typically disagree with and say, you know what, can maybe lower the temperatures a little bit. This was an outstanding show, an outstanding conversation. You're both welcome back anytime, and I'm really grateful for your time. I wish you both the best in the next week. That is Sarah Rumpf making her first appearance on the show, contributing editor at Mediaite, series editor at The Unpopulist. Very grateful to have you, Sarah. And B-Mac, Brian McCullough is making a return appearance. Anarchist and comedian, Bronx-based social worker. B-Mac, Sarah, thank you both.
Thanks so much. This was fun.
You got it. Oh, that was awesome. That was awesome. And shout out to the commenters. We're killer tonight, huh? One time for the guests and the commenters. They were absolutely awesome. And I'm very grateful when a commenter is willing to call me out my shit just a little bit. I really like that. All right, folks, that's going to do it. We'll be back next Thursday night live here in Brooklyn, New York with a whole new show. Shout out to Taylor, Dan, the entire crew here. We'll see you next time on Common Threads. Have a good week.